What is good, horror? This is your boy Horror Gamer, back with another video for you. And as you can tell by the title of this video, this is another Horror Gamer Reads. And if you don't know, we are working on Resident Evil Volume 1, The Umbrella Conspiracy by S.D. Perry. So, last time we were in this book, they sent Bravo team to check out the what's going on in the H0rr0rgam3r forest, and they're waiting to hear back. But we got a lot of insight on like Albert Wesker, even though he's kind of seems like he's a bit shady, and we got a little bit more story of Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, and right now they're just briefing everybody on the mission. And yeah, so with all that being said, let's just jump right into it and see what happens next. So, we left off. It says, extrapolate is what it says. Wesker folded his arms, waiting. At least no one had left. Joe plunged forward, warming to the material. The cannibalism and dismemberment suggest ritualistic behavior, as does the presence of decomposed flesh found on some of the victims. Like the killers are carrying parts of previous unknown victims to their attacks. We've got saliva and tissue samples from 4 separate human assailants, though eyewitness reports suggest up to 10 or 11 people. And those killed by animals were all found or found to be attacked in the same vicinity, suggesting that they wandered into some kind of off-limits area. The saliva traces appear to be canine, though there's still some disagreement. She trailed off and finished. Wesker's face betrayed nothing, but he nodded slowly. Not bad. Not bad at all. Disprove? Jill sighed. She hated having to shoot her own theory down, but that was part of the job, and in all honesty, the part that most encouraged clear, rational thinking. The stars train their people not to fixate on any single path on the truth. She glanced at her notes again. It's highly unlikely that a cult that big would move around much, and the murders started too recently to be local. The RPD would have seen signs before now, some escalation to this kind of behavior. Also, the level of post-mortem violence indicates disorganized offenders, and they usually work solo. Joseph Frost, the Alpha Vehicle Specialist, piped up from the back of the room. The animal attack part works, though. Protecting their territory and all that. Wesker scooped up a pen and walked to the dry erase board next to the desk, talking as he moved. I agree. He wrote territorially on the board and then turned back to face her. Anything else? Jill shook her head, but felt good that she contributed something. She knew the cold aspect was reaching, but it had been all she could come up with. The police certainly hadn't come up with anything better. Wesker turned his attention to Brad Vickers, who suggested that it was a new strain of terrorism, and that demands would be made soon. Wesker put terrorism on the board, but didn't seem enthusiastic about the idea. Neither did anybody else. Brad quickly went back to his headset, checking on Bravo team's status. Both Joseph and Barry passed on theorizing, and Chris' views on the killings were already well known. If vague, he believed that there was an organized assault going on, and that external influences were involved somehow. Wesker asked if he had anything new to add. Stressing new, Jill noticed, and Chris shook his head, looking depressed. Wesker capped the black pen and sat on the edge of his desk, gazing thoughtfully at the black expanse of the board. "It's a start," he said. "I know you've all read the police and coroner reports and listened to the eyewitness accounts." Excuse me. Vickers, hear over. From the back of the room, Brad spoke quickly into the headset, interrupting Wesker. The captain lowered his voice and continued. "Now, at this point, we don't know what we're dealing with, and I know that all of us have some concerns with how the RPD has been dealing with the situation, but now that we're on the case, What?" At the sound of Brad's raised voice, Jill turned toward the back of the room along with everyone else. He was standing up, agitated, one hand pressed over his earpiece of the set. "Bravo team, report. Repeat, Bravo team, report." Wesker stood up. "Vickers, put it on, calm." Brad hit the switch on his console, and the bright crackling sound of static filled the room. Jill strained to hear a human voice amidst the fuzz, but for several tense seconds there was nothing. Then, "You copy? Malfunction. We're going to have to..." The rest was lost in a burst of static. It sounded like Enrico Martini, the Bravo team leader. Jill chewed at her lower lip and exchanged a worried glance with Chris. Enrico had seemed frantic. They all listened for another moment, but there was nothing more than the sound of open air. "Position," Wesker snapped. Brad's face was pale. "They're in the, Sector 22, tail end of C, except I've lost the signal. The transmitter is offline." Jill felt stunned, saw the feeling reflected in the faces of the others. The helicopter transmitter was designed to keep working no matter what. The only way it would shut down is if something big happened. The entire system blanking out or being seriously damaged. Something like a crash. Chris felt a stomach knot as he recognized the coordinates. The Spencer estate. Marini had said something about a malfunction. It had to be a coincidence, but it didn't feel like one. The Bravos were in trouble, and particularly on top of the old Umbrella Mansion. All of this went through his head in a split second, and then he was standing ready to move. Whatever happened, the stars took care of their own. Wesker was already in action. He addressed the team as he reached for his keys, heading for the gun safe. "Joseph, take over the board and keep trying to raise them. Vickers, warm up the copter and get clearance. I want us ready to fly in 5. The captain unlocked the safe, and Brad handed the headset to Joseph and hurried out of the room. The reinforced metal door swung open, revealing an arsenal of rifles and handguns shelved above boxes of ammo. Wesker turned to the rest of the team. His expression had bland as ever, but his voice brisk with authority. "Barry, Chris, I want you to get the weapons into the copter, loaded and secured. Jill, get the vest and packs and meet us on the roof." He clipped a key off his ring and tossed it to her. "I'm going to put a call into Irons. Make sure he gets us some backup. and EMTs down at the barricade, Wesker said, then blew out sharply. 5 minutes or less, folks. Let's move. Jill left for the locker room and Barry grabbed one of the empty duffel bags from the bottom of the gun safe, nodding at Chris. Chris scooped up a second bag and started loading boxes of shells, cartridges, and clips as Barry carefully handed the weapons, checking each one behind them. Joseph again tried hailing the Bravo team, but to no avail. Chris wondered again about the proximity of the Bravo team's last report position to the Spencer estate. Was there a connection, and if so, how? Billy worked for Umbrella. They owned the estate. Chief? Wesker's. We just lost contact with Bravo team. I'm taking this in. Chris felt a sudden rush of adrenaline and worked faster, aware that every second counted could mean the difference between life and death for his friends and teammates. A serious crash was unlikely. The Bravos would have been flying low and the Forest was a decent pilot. But what about after they'd gone down? Wesker quickly relayed the information to Irons over the phone and then hung up, walking back to join them. I'm going to make sure our copter's outfitted, Joseph. Give it another minute and then turn it over to the boys at the front desk. You can help these two carry the equipment up. I'll see you on the top. Wesker nodded to them and hurried out, his footsteps clattering loudly down the hall. He's good, Barry said quickly, and Chris had to agree. It was reassuring to see that their new captain didn't rattle easily. Chris still wasn't sure how he felt about the man personally, but his respect for Wesker's abilities was growing by the minute. Come in, Bravo. Do you copy? Repeat. Joseph hastily went on, his voice tight with strain, his pleas lost to the haze of white static that pulsed out into the room. Wesker strode down the desperate hall and through the shabbier of the 2 second-floor waiting rooms, nodding briskly at a pair of uniforms that stood talking by the soda machine. The door to the outside landing was choked open, a faint, humble breeze cutting through the thickness of the air inside. It was still daylight, but not for much longer. He hoped that wouldn't complicate matters, although he figured it probably would. Wesker took a left and started down the winding corridor that led to the helipad, absently running through a mental checklist. Hailing open procedure, weapons, gear, report. He already knew that everything was in order, but went through it again anyway. It didn't pay to get sloppy, and assumptions were the first step down the path. He liked to think of himself as a man of precision, one who had taken all possibilities into account and decided on the best course of action after thoroughly weighing all factors. Control was being a competent leader was all about. But to close this case, he shut the thought down before it could get any further. He knew what he had done, and there was still plenty of time. All he needed to concentrate on now was getting the Bravos back, safe and sound. Wesker opened the door at the end of the hall and stepped out into the bright evening. The rising hum of the copter's engine and the smell of the machine oil filling his senses. The small rooftop helipad was cooler than inside, partially draped by the shadow of an aging water tower, and empty except for the gunmetal gray Alpha helicopter. For the first time, he wondered what had gone wrong for Bravo. He'd had Joseph and the rookie Checked both birds out yesterday, and they'd been fine. All systems go. He dismissed that train of thought as he walked toward the copter, his shadow falling long across the concrete. It didn't matter why. Not anymore. What mattered was what came next. Expect the unexpected. That was the star's motto. Although that basically meant to be prepared for anything, except nothing, that was Albert Wesker's motto. A little less catchy, maybe, but infinitely more useful. It virtually guaranteed that nothing would ever surprise him. He stepped up to the open pilot door and got a shaky thumbs up from Vickers. The man looked positively green, and Wesker briefly considered leaving him behind. Chris was licensed to fly, and Vickers had a reputation for choking under the gun. The last thing he needed was for his people to freeze up if there was trouble. Then he thought about the lost Bravos and decided against it. This was a rescue mission. The worst Vickers could do would be to throw up on himself if the copter had crashed badly, and Wesker could live with that. He opened the side door and crouched his way into the cabin, doing a quick inventory of the equipment that lined the walls. Emergency flares, ration kits. He popped the lid on the heavy dented footlocker behind the benches and looked through the basic medical supplies, nodding to himself. They were as ready as they were going to be. Wesker grinned suddenly, wondering that Brian Irons was doing right now. Shitting his pants, no doubt. Wesker chuckled as he stepped back out onto the sun-baked asphalt, getting a sudden clear mental image of Irons, his pudgy red cheeks glowing red with anger, and a crap dribbling down his leg. Irons liked to think he could control everything and everyone around him, and lost his temper when he couldn't. And that made him an idiot. Unfortunately for all of them, he was an idiot with a little bit of power. Wesker had checked him out carefully before taking the position in Raccoon City and knew a few things about the chief that didn't pat well with him in a particular positive light. He had no intention of using that information. But if Irons attempted to screw things up one more time, Wesker had no qualms about letting that information get out. Letting that information get out. Or at least telling him that I have access to it. It'd certainly keep him out of the way. Barry Burton stepped out onto the concrete carrying the ammo cache, his giant biceps flexing as he shifted his hold on the heavy canvas bag and started for the copter. Chris and Joseph followed. Chris with the sidearm and Joseph lugging a satchel of RPGs. The compact grenade launcher slung over his one shoulder. Wesker marveled at Burton's brute strength as the Alpha climbed in and casually set the bag down as though it didn't weigh over 100 pounds. Barry was bright enough, but in the stars, muscle was a definite asset. Everyone else in the squad was in good shape, but compared to Barry, they were pencil necks. As the three of them stored the equipment, Wesker turned his attention back to the door, watching for Jill. He checked his watch and frowned. It had been just under 5 minutes since their last contact with Bravo. They made excellent time. So where the hell was Valentine? He hadn't interacted with her much since she'd come to Raccoon, but her file was a rare review. She'd gotten high recommendations from everyone she'd worked with, praised by her last captain as highly intelligent and unusually calm in a crisis. She'd have to be with her history. Her father was Dick Valentine, the best thief in the business a couple of decades back. He trained her to follow in his footsteps, and word had it that she had done quite well until Daddy had been incarcerated. Prodigy or no, she could stand to buy a decent watch. He silently urged Jill to get her ass into gear and motioned for Vickers to start the blades turning. It was time to find out how bad things were out there. All right, Horror Horde, so I think we're going to leave it there today. So, they had just gotten word that Bravo team, I guess, crashed because there's nothing. They have nothing. So, as for what we read right now, it's starting to get tense. It's starting to become a good read. Jill seems a little meh. Like, she don't have that fire. Like, you know, but, I mean, we still got a lot of book left. She might turn that around. You know, Chris is having this internal struggle with himself. Barry just seems like a brick shithouse, you know what I'm saying? He's the one who probably should have been punching boulders and not Chris. But, no, all in all, so far, this book is a real good read. You know, Wesker, I don't know how to gauge Wesker right now. But all in all, so far, this book is really, really, really good. And like I said, we got a lot of time left, guys. We got a lot of book to read yet. So, yeah. So with all that being said, Horror Horde, I really hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you. I know I'm not the strongest reader. You know, I do like to read, but reading out loud isn't like my strong suit. So I do apologize if it doesn't seem like I know what I'm doing, but I just enjoy reading. So, and I hope you guys are enjoying the story too. So, all right, Horror Horde, with all that being said, I love you guys. Thank you guys. And don't forget, if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button along with that dingly ding ding button. Every time your boy Horror Gamer throws up one of these Horror Gamer reads or anything else, that you're always in the know. Always in the know. Also, head on over to the Horror Gamer Patreon to see what awesome perks you get with being a Horror Gamer patron. You know, we have horror movie nights. We have just get-togethers where we sit down and talk horror movies and just hang out. We have all that stuff. So, all right, Horror Horde, with all that being said, I love you guys. Thank you guys. And until next time, don't forget, this is your boy Horror Gamer saying, as always, don't fear the darkness. Embrace it.